This is a podcast from BFM 89.9, the business station.
Connecting the dots for businesses in today's top story with Celcom Digi Business.
7:48 a.m. You're listening to The Morning Run with Shazana and Keith. Now, yesterday was Malaysia Day, so it's an apt time to review developments related to the Malaysia Agreement 1963. That is the basis for the country as it stands today. So last Thursday, the federal government doubled the 300 million ringgit interim allocation for Sabah and Sarawak to 600 million ringgit beginning 2025 amid ongoing negotiations to resolve outstanding state rights under MA63.
Payments were kept at 26.7 million ringgit until 2021 without any mandatory 5-year review until the federal government under the former Prime Minister Dato Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob increased it to 125.6 million in 2022. It was subsequently increased to 300 million ringgit under the Madani government of Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim last year. And to date, 11 of the 21 claims under MA63 have been resolved, with 7 of them happening under Anwar's administration.
So what are the outstanding issues under MA63, and what do these developments say about the health of relations between Putrajaya, Sabah and Sarawak? Unpacking these developments with us is Dr. James Chin, Professor of Asian Studies at the University of Tasmania. James, good morning. Always good to have you on the show. Now, the bulk of progress in MA63 has actually come just in the past 5 years after the changes of government. What accounts for the momentum in resolving MA63 issues that wasn't seen under the previous Barisan Nasional administration in the decades that they were in power?
Good morning. So I think the way to look at it is that during the administration of the Barisan Nasional, Sabah and Sarawak were seen as fixed deposit. They didn't really care what the leaders or the peoples of Sabah and Sarawak wanted. They always knew that the Barisan Nasional was super strong in Sabah and Sarawak, so we can ignore the wishes. So the big change happened in 2008 when Najib realized that he required the MPs, the Barisan MPs from Sabah and Sarawak to stay in power. So that's the reason why he appointed Sabahans and Sarawakians to be the speakers in parliament and the deputy speakers, and he also made Malaysia Day a public holiday. But the key watershed moment happened in 2018 when Pakatan took power. As some of your listeners remember, out of the 5 key pillars of the Pakatan Manifesto, 1 was devoted to Sabah and Sarawak. That was the first time when Sabah and Sarawak became a key agenda item in the manifesto since the formation of Malaysia in 63. So that's the reason why since 2018, all these issues have floated to the surface. And since 2018, every government, despite the changes in government, they've always set up an MA63 committee at the cabinet level to resolve these issues pertaining to historical grievances of the peoples of Sabah and Sarawak.
So there seems to be a bit more momentum right now, James. I mean, Anwar Ibrahim's government has managed to resolve 7 claims within the first 2 years of his administration. Total 11 claims concluded overall. What else needs to be resolved? Are they the same for each state? Are there any priorities? Low-hanging fruits, maybe?
Sure. I think that is one wrong way of looking at it, because during the administration of Pakatan Harapan, the first administration in 2018 under Mahathir, they had 21 issues. So what happens is that new issues are brought up all the time. I would suggest that it is not true that Anwar has been faster in terms of dealing with this issue. Some of the issues that Anwar resolved, they actually started discussing it during the Ismail Sabri or Muhyiddin administration. So he sort of benefited from the end part of it. In terms of Anwar's movement, the big change is, of course, he has agreed to some of the key administrative items. For example, in terms of some education stuff, he's returned the power back to Sarawak. Significantly, he has increased the funding, the special funding from Sarawak, as you mentioned in the introduction, to $300 million. That is quite significant. But the big issues are the one that they will not touch for the time being, but are the 3 issues that I would regard as really, really crucial. My argument is that Anwar should really try to resolve these three key issues before the next general election. And the three key issues, one, of course, is specific to Sabah. Sabah wants a conclusion to the 40% revenue rebate. So in the constitution, it's quite interesting. In 63, it was actually written into the constitution that Sabah will get 40% of the revenues raised in Sabah back to Sabah. So they want that. Second issue is the continental shelf issue. Both Sabah and Sarawak claim that the continental shelf actually belongs to them. And the legal argument is actually quite strong because they belong to Sabah and Sarawak at the time of independence. And what is clear in the Malaysia Agreement is that as long as the law is valid on the 16th of September, they become law of Malaysia after 16th of September. The third one is of course, the so-called one-third seats in the federal parliament. That is also very crucial. So my suggestion, Anwar, is that get this done because this will really stem a historical legacy. Because he is having a lot of problems in Peninsular Malaysia, especially with the Malay polity. He might want to pivot to the east where he might receive a better welcome.
Okay, so just over the weekend, there was a proposal by another civil society group, Project Sama, for Sabah and Sarawak to be awarded one-third of seats in the Dewan Negara first, rather than go through the complicated process of having to revamp the Dewan Rakyat seat allocations. You've rebutted this proposal. You don't agree with it. Why do you say that?
So let me start by saying that this is a really dishonest argument by the people from Peninsular Malaysia, the NGO groups. The reason is that, as I mentioned earlier, this is all about historical grievances to reset the relationship based on the formation of Malaysia. So if you remember, at the formation of Malaysia, it was made very clear. Even Lee Kuan Yew wrote it openly and gave press, interviews about it. He made it very clear that at that time, the leaders for North Borneo, which is Sabah now, Sarawak and Singapore, were very uncomfortable with the fact that Malaya can dominate the entire process in Parliament. So a deal was negotiated where, Malaya will get slightly less than 2/3 majority, the minimum to alter the constitution, and that Sabah, Sarawak, and Singapore collectively will hold slightly more than 1/3. So at the time of independence, it was about 34.5%. So that's the reason why when we talk about this argument about getting back, we are really talking about resetting a historical wrong. The problem with the NGO is that they're trying to apply today's lens and say that why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? The problem is that this is not about using the present values or the present system to look back at the past. This is about setting a historical right that was wrong, because when Singapore left the Federation of Malaysia, Singapore's seat should have gone to Sabah and Sarawak so that the ratio would have been maintained. So my argument is that, you want to go back to history and reset the relationship. Now, the other argument they made is that, you can do the same thing with Dewan Negara, but that was not what happened in 63. And also, it's a big dishonest of them, because we know that the Dewan Negara, for many, many reasons, right, is not where the power lies. We all know that the Dewan Negara has no political legitimacy because all the senators are appointed. Secondly, it's made up mostly of retired people, not real politicians, but it's given as a reward. And thirdly, the Dewan Negara really has no power. It can basically delay bills, but, it can really, not vote down a bill, because after a certain amount of period, right, the bill gets passed anyway through the lower house. And this is seen very clearly. Even you guys in the media, right, you hardly ever report anything that happens in Dewan Negara. All the action is in, Dewan Rakyat, the lower house. The vast majority of the ministers, including the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, they're all from the lower house. And in fact, those ministers appointed from the upper house are seen as backdoor ministers, because they get appointed to a senatorship. So for all sorts of reasons, I think it is really dishonest of them to try to use this argument.
You have a lot of valid points, James, and it's true. I think the pinnacle of discussions are still in the Dewan Rakyat rather than the Dewan Negara. But there are also concerns that increasing the number of seats for Sabah and Sarawak would exacerbate the issue of malapportionment and create a bloated parliament. Do you see those concerns as valid? And is there a way to mitigate these effects if 1/3 seats are allocated for East Malaysia? We have about a minute on the clock.
So again, this is a dishonest argument. All I'm saying is that we need to do a historical right for what happened in 65. So it's nothing to do with whether there's a right balance or wrong balance. I can also make the argument, how come they didn't raise this issue in 63 when the Federation was formed? Because there was an understanding that Sabah, Sarawak, and Singapore must have an indirect veto power by getting slightly more than 1/3 of the seats.
James, thanks very much for speaking with us. That was Dr. James Chin, Professor of Asian Studies at the University of Tasmania, weighing in on the developments with regard to MA63, parts where there's been progress and parts that he feels the priorities should be for the Madani government in order to push things forward, especially before the next GE.
And it's really interesting that he pointed out why it took them so long when it was still under the Barisan National Government, because they weren't seen as important by the Barisan National Government and that they were just fixed deposits. And I'm glad that they are more inclusive with it now, not really by choice.
Things have changed so much, and really the value of East Malaysia to the politics of the Putrajaya, I think it's immense and has changed significantly. Okay, 7:59 in the morning. Stay tuned to BFM 89.9.
Stay informed with Top Story with your trusted business partner, Celcom Digi Business.
You have been listening to a podcast from BFM 89.9, the business station. For more stories of the same kind, download the BFM app.